Okay, so I know that everybody's ripping this adaptation to shreds right now, and for good reason. So I decided to take the harder route of actually trying to find the good in this version. But I'm not going to review the whole show, I'm just going to look at the pilots from the original show and this adaptation to see exactly what they added and what they changed from the source material. It was extremely hard looking at what they were trying to do with the source material without seeing how they butchered everything, but I'm going to try my best and look at it as a new thing as opposed to a loss of translation. I also want to look at the original show and praise it for what it does. I was planning on making a video about all of Shinichiro Watanabe's works, and I might still do that, but this just gave me too perfect an opportunity to talk about the best show ever created that I couldn't pass it up. The pilot of the original show is probably the best 22 minutes of any TV show of all time. It introduces the main characters' personalities and dynamics perfectly, and also sets up the major themes and plot points in the 25 episodes to come. It starts with a monotone shot of Spike smoking a cigarette in the rain. Church bells ringing until all sound fades out, introducing the song Memory, featuring a music box as the only instrument. Spike drops a solitary rose in a puddle. As the shot zooms in, it smash cuts to clips of a shootout. Still, the only thing we hear is Memory. The rose then becomes highlighted in red, juxtaposed with Spike's blood. This is an amazing first scene of a show. We don't hear a single line of dialogue or gunshot, and yet it's dense with foreshadowing and symbolism. And then, without warning, we cut to Tank. It shows us so much more in just 50 seconds of its runtime than the 50 minutes the live-action version had, but I'm getting ahead of myself. With this first scene, we can deduce that this guy had some kind of past lover, which is what the rose represents, but it has thorns as well, and also a gun. Maybe hinting at a betrayal or a complication of some kind, which perhaps led to the shootout we see, aided by the piercing red contrasting against the monotone blue which I mentioned earlier. The numerous cigarettes on the floor communicate to us that a long time has passed, as he is perhaps waiting for something or someone. Cigarettes are used a lot throughout the show to signify time passing, which is a fascinating choice because it's also a kind of timer to the inevitability of his eventual death. The music box commonly represents childhood or innocence, which is another symbol in the show tying it to the past, and the simple melody drowns out everything else, making it feel more surreal and dreamlike. So how does the adaptation treat this? Well, we first see a reflection of Spike in a puddle, where he's holding a single rose, no smoking, no rain. It then immediately intersperses clips of an unnecessarily gratuitous sex scene. We see a clip of him shooting one guy, he drops a rose, intentionally this time. The rose becomes red, but there's no blood in the jewel. It cuts to Spike back on the bebop, implying it was him dreaming about having a flashback. The sound is punctuated with gunshots and moaning, along with the music box. So, okay, that was something. Let's start with what they added. We now know immediately that Spike had a lover, the rose wasn't enough, so he needed a sex scene. Can I just talk about that for a second? I thought, or I was hoping, that with this adaptation they would improve the female representation from the source material, being that it heavily sexualized most female characters, and that's the only minor problem I have with the show, but nope, they decided to double down on that. It's not all bad, however. I think the way they edited it makes it seem plausible as a dream, and also makes a flashback more clearly a flashback. The omission of any kind of allusion to a church removes the foreshadowing and biblical subversion from the original, and also just avoids a cool set piece. They also seem to make Spike a non-smoker, which is an interesting choice, I guess. Maybe he quit in the 22 years since the show ended. The thing I can glean from this version is that they didn't want to have any amount of vagueness or subtlety in Spike's backstory, which is fine. I imagine they'll instead build on it in a smart way later on. But wait, that's not the start. In fact, that's 10 minutes into the first episode of the adaptation, which would have been halfway through the first episode of the original show. So, the adaptation actually starts like the Cowboy Bebop movie from 2001, which isn't a bad decision. The movie has an efficient opening where we get reintroduced to the cast in a more fun and lighthearted way with a basic bounty hunt. We first look at the bounties where a guy is sitting on the counter spouting nonsense while trying to seem smart, and it's genuinely amusing. But he sneaks in an actual critique of the security corporation in control of protecting the convenience store. We get a sense of Spike and Jet's personality and how they work together. It's clear that they've been doing this for a while. Spike walks in acting dumb to get the drop on the robbers, and we see his fighting style adapts to his environment and the opponent, while Jet comes in strategically and incapacitates them efficiently. I think arguably the most important part of this intro is when one of the guys unexpectedly comes out of the bathroom and takes a hostage. Jet drops his gun, but Spike raises his. At first it seems like he doesn't care about the hostage, but in reality he's trying to get the bounty to aim the gun at him so he can take him out. This suggests that Spike holds less regard for his own life than others, coming from his belief that he's living in a dream. I think this opening is good for a reintroduction to the themes and the characters we know and love from the show. Netflix using that introduction instead of the first one is good because it means that original anime viewers can easily get back into it, and it attracts new audiences by jumping straight into the action. The way that they handled it is a different story. Now it's set in a casino in space. Now, to be fair, the design and animation of this casino is actually really cool. The first problem is how they employ the good old headphone trick, because a casino in space is not a believable place to just walk into oblivious that there's a crime going on. They even show that there are dead bodies in the lobby. So Spike isn't doing it to get the drop on the robbers, it's just to look cool, I guess. The other problem with the new setting is that it doesn't give enough density to show off Spike's adaptive fighting style. We also don't hear any conversation between Spike and Jet, so we don't know how they work or if they even know each other. So we can assume that this is a different take on the characters. Some of the lines hint that they haven't been bounty hunters for a long time and they haven't really gotten used to each other, which is an interesting choice. This time the main villain is just spouting some anti-corporate nonsense that doesn't have any genuine points on the topic and isn't amusing or engaging in the slightest.
The shitbag corporations.
This introduces the two gripes I have with the dialogue in this show. The first one is how they handle the themes of the original show without any subtlety or nuance. The way people speak reveals everything you need to know, so the visuals don't matter, while also being extremely shallow. The second is that it feels like everyone's dialogue is written by Joss Whedon, which can work occasionally, but the humor in the original show came from the interactions between the Bebop crew, but now everyone makes the same kind of jokes all the time. The hostage scene is a perfect example of this. Now both Spike and Jet don't drop their weapons, and they literally just bully the hostage, so it comes off as them being assholes.
Oh, she dies.
Oh, she dies. Wait, that's your hostage?
Spike.
Was she like 80? I mean, she looks like she's led a very full, rich life, haven't you, ma'am?
Because the adaptation needs to stretch everything out to unnecessary and excessive lengths, the intro doesn't end there. They instead introduce an additional complication that is ultimately meaningless. There's a piece of world building with this unstable disruptor weapon that is actually pretty compelling, if it was ever brought up again in the show. They end up implying that they excessively beat up the bounty and tank plays. Just to be clear, I don't think they had to make the intro stick completely to the source material. In fact, I think it would have been better if they had gone in the complete opposite direction and leaned more into the changes, because when you try keeping some original ideas while implementing them differently, it just seems sloppy and ill-considered. There are so many stories that you could tell in the Cowboy Bebop universe. I mean, each episode in the original takes inspiration from vastly different genres of film, and it works. That leads into my next point of comparison, which is how each show handles aesthetics and composition. The original show deliberately uses a retro sci-fi spaghetti western aesthetic, which fits with the concept of the past and present, which is extended from the characters. Spike has his real and fake eye, one seeing the past and one seeing the present. Jet has his prosthetic arm, which he doesn't want to replace because he doesn't want to let go of the past. Faye being in cryosleep for 50 years, losing everything and everyone from her past. Ed is a genius hacker from Earth, which has long been abandoned since the moon was destroyed. It's not only the style or design of the world, but also how the show presents them shot to shot. Since animation is a very versatile medium that doesn't have limitations in terms of set design and camera position, it means the show can take any perspective and any setting that the writers can think of. This also goes for color palette and lighting. The show constantly adjusts its value and lighting quality to mimic certain genres and moods. Take the episode Pierrot Le Fou, which is heavily inspired by noir and horror styles. It conveys this by subduing the color and making the shadows dramatic and much darker, and it can get away with making it exaggerated because it's animated. Also, this shot could never look good in live action. Each and every character has a distinct and recognizable design and style, the same with every planet, every ship, and every plot. The only limitation of the animated medium that I can think of is how much the animators are being overworked and how underpaid they are. Seriously, it's an awful part of the animation industry that doesn't get enough attention. The music in Cowboy Bebop is an integral part of the storytelling and aesthetic. It's mostly inspired by American jazz, but it also changes in tune to the tone of the show is going for. None of Yoko Kanno's work is wasted because it's given space to breathe life into each scene. It allows for moments where no dialogue is necessary to convey the ideas and narrative, just like the opening 50 seconds of the pilot. It's also just a banger OST to listen to on its own. How can a live-action show emulate this or appropriate it into a more grounded medium? Well, looking at the pilot alone should tell us all we need to know. So the overall aesthetic of the adaptation is a lot less Western and more sci-fi, which fits with the changes we've seen from the intros. It's a lot more Ridley Scott and not as much Sergio Leone. But it feels a lot further from reality than the animation, which is very ironic. That's not particularly a criticism. I mean, it's a sci-fi story, so taking creative liberties is absolutely valid, but the contrast between real actors and CGI is a bit jarring, and it makes them feel less involved in the world that they are a part of. Again, that can be analyzed as a thematic choice to make them even more separate from life itself, and more dreamlike. However, the direction they've taken with the characters, which I will get to later, contradicts that. I think every part of the show is confused. This is most obvious with the cinematography. Look at these two shots from the bar scene, where this Desperado-inspired character is initiating a dangerous drug deal. The most notable change is the lighting and value of the scene. The one on the left is tense, ominous, and foreboding. The colors are subdued and cold, and there is a small light bathing most of the scene in darkness. This is aided by the placement of the characters. Both of them are placed a few meters apart, showing their lack of trust, and conveniently most of their bodies are being draped in shadow, making them hard to read. I could also say that the screen ratio and camera placement makes the shot more claustrophobic, but the screen ratio is mostly just due to the limitations of TV screens back then, although that's also a point made towards the importance of limitations in art, but that's a different topic entirely. Anyone who has the most basic or surface level knowledge of film and or art theory would be able to infer this fairly easily. No one on Netflix's team saw this. The same shot in the adaptation is basic, silly, and amateurish. The colors are way too saturated and warm, it's extremely well lit, and the camera is very close to the characters. The placement of things in frame is sloppy. The characters are very close, so there's no sense of distrust or concern. These beads in the doorway are an interesting way to frame the shot, but why is this a part of the bar? It feels more like a health food shop. I could also talk about how awful the dialogue is here. They force a really awful joke that even the characters within the show are confused by.
It is. Then we make a deal. Then we have cupcakes. Cupcakes.
But I've already gone to depth about why I hate the dialogue. I don't think anything was considered when they placed the camera in compositions. A lot of people have pointed out the excessive use of Dutch angles, which are never used properly. I mentioned the Pierre Le Fou episode from the original earlier, and looking at the adaptation perfectly displays my point. No longer is the contrast in colors adjusted to make it clearly noir, it's just the same bland, uncharacteristic style as the rest of the show. They also have no idea how to manage Yoko Kanno's score throughout the show. The music itself is great, as always, but it's never used properly within the scenes, and it's never given space to work. I mean, just look at this scene. Just like I said, I think this show is extremely confused. I don't have solid proof of this, but my assumption is that the people working on this adaptation watched the original once, and in perfect unison said, "What if we made this live action and doubled the length for no reason?" That's the feeling I get when I watch it. I do not think they have to remake it one-to-one. I have to say that constantly or else people will get angry at me. But they have to commit to making it different, or else it becomes easily scrutinizable. I don't want to blame the team for everything wrong with the show because they have some good ideas here. The reason for its confusion is because they're trying to make two different shows at once. But if it wasn't associated with Cowboy Bebop, they would have the freedom to make the show that they want while being inspired by Cowboy Bebop. As I said in the aesthetic section, each character in Cowboy Bebop has a distinct and purposeful role in the narrative and ideas presented. I'm not going to talk solely about the pilot in this section, but it will come in later. The family dynamic between the Bebop crew is thoroughly well written and developed throughout the show. Jet is essentially the parental figure, albeit a jaded one. Spike is the adolescent child who goes anywhere he wants without telling anyone where he's going or how long he'll be gone for. Faye is the annoying younger sibling who pretends to hate their family but actually cares about them very much and doesn't want to lose them. Ein is, well, a dog, so yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Ed is the hyperactive, hyper-inquisitive toddler who doesn't really understand the family drama but wants to be a part of it no matter what. They also cause most of the conflict accidentally. Each member isn't only defined by their newfound family, but also their own personal histories that catch up with them in inconvenient ways despite their efforts to ignore them. The show mostly focuses on Spike, but they don't completely ignore the rest of the crew. There are specific episodes entirely dedicated to exploring each member in depth, and they're some of the best episodes in the show. Black Dog's Serenade is an incredibly compelling episode which develops not only Jet Black's character, but also the deeply rooted corruption of law enforcement in Cowboy Bebop's universe. Its world and characters are one and the same, one reflects the other and vice versa, and that's why it feels so realized. I avoided analyzing the characters in the adaptation in too much detail in the beginning section because I wanted to go more in depth here alongside the rest of the pilot. From that beginning I've already analyzed, the interpretation we're supposed to have of Spike is that he's a self-aggrandizing badass who has no regard for human life. This can be an interesting interpretation if they assess that, and investigate how his reckless and self-destructive behavior affects the people around him. Especially because just after that they tell us Jet has a daughter. He now has even more stakes in each narrative, and he's actively supporting someone else with his cowboy career, which can also be very intriguing to explore and changes the dynamic between Spike and Jet. This also comes at the cost of lessening the idea that every character on the Bebop is just living their lives moment to moment, because they don't have anything connecting them to the present, but that's not an issue if they decide to explore something completely different. In the original, Spike and Jet use different methods of finding the bounty. Spike goes to a spiritual advisor, and Jet uses his connections with the police and his own experience as a detective. The spiritual guide is an interesting choice for two reasons. It introduces Spike's relationship with spirituality, as his most famous quote is, "Whatever happens, happens," which also foreshadows the constant motif of fate that occurs throughout the show. Jet's connection with the police is brought up constantly and is an important aspect of his relationships and character, as well as his trust in his own skill. The adaptation just goes with the police tips, so Spike and Jet go around asking people if they've seen the bounty. I actually kind of like the conversation Spike and Jet have in this version more than the original. The original had a short bit where they make fun of how poor they are, whereas in this version they deal with how them being poor actually affects Jet with him having a daughter and all. Spike is reprimanded for his reckless behavior, which is good. Again, the heavy-handed dialogue kind of ruins the scene, but it's the best part of the episode. Although, did I mention how much they stretch every scene? Every single scene takes way too long, and it's so hard to watch sometimes. The pacing is awful. That is also why I don't think it was a good idea to introduce Faye in this episode. Yeah, they don't waste an episode to introduce Faye's character, they just shoehorn her into this one. Not only does this tarnish her introduction by making her secondary to the main story, but it also doesn't give us enough time to get used to Spike and Jet's dynamic before adding a third character to it. I actually don't mind Faye's personality in this version. She kind of feels like a copy of Spike, but I like how they squabble a lot of the time. The plot she introduces in this episode really flattens the character of Katarina. Apparently she's running away from a super wealthy family. Wow, how original! Okay, the original character isn't that well developed either, but that wasn't the point of her story. I don't understand why they decided to make each episode of this adaptation almost an hour long. Oh wait, I understand exactly why. They couldn't explain every semblance of subtext if it was any shorter. It never gives you a chance to piece together what's going on with just visuals, despite it being a visual medium. They have to make everything extremely obvious with dialogue. These three scenes in the original explain exactly what we're supposed to take away from this episode.
お前は女に狙われる。そして死ぬ。
またかよ。
また?
Adios, cowboy. Adios.
Spike's relationship with Julia is foreshadowed without being completely spoiled in the beginning, and it's a tragic story of people trying to escape their fate and failing, which cleverly reflects Spike's story. While in the adaptation, we have this.
You okay?
Yeah. Never better. Well, you just remind me of someone.
I will admit that they make Asimov slightly more sympathetic than the original, but that doesn't mean much. I can't ignore the strange relationship with women that the original show has. It's definitely not the most progressive show, but it's not blatantly sexist. You would expect a show from 2021 would at least be able to pass that lower bar, but Netflix takes one step forward and two steps back. Also, did I mention Vicious shows up in this episode? Yeah, it's not like it's a good reveal or anything. He just kind of shows up and it's like, hey, Vicious is here. And he does this a lot throughout the entire show, and it just completely ruins every episode. Like, not only does it ruin the meaning and the purpose of this episodic formula of the original show, but it also just makes it not rewatchable. Because now everything that happens in the galaxy is now connected with this one person. It's just Spike and Vicious's story without it being about the entire galaxy and these isolated moments which are supposed to represent human experience. And it just completely shits all over that. And it's awful. And it's actually the exact same problem that H. Bomber Guy talked about with the Sherlock Holmes show by Stephen Moffat, and it doesn't give any room for the entire setting to breathe or actually have a realistic existence. It's all surrounding this all-encompassing syndicate and Vicious specifically. Also, every scene with him is just bad. It's just unwatchable, like completely unwatchable. If you can remember back to 20 minutes ago, I made the bold as hell claim that the pilot of the original Cowboy Bebop is the best 22 minutes of television ever. The pilot of the original show is probably the best 22 minutes of any TV show of all time. And the reason I said that might be already clear from how long I've talked about it already, but to take inspiration from the adaptation, let me explain it in the most obvious and overt terms as possible. Asteroid Blues is a perfect introduction to everything you need to know about the show. It's a model for the rest of the episodes to follow. It's not the best episode in the show, but it's a perfect baseline. The characters get involved in a syndicate-related problem, Spike makes a connection with the bounty, but eventually fate catches up before he's able to save them. And the Bebop crew go back to their empty lives, still poor and more depressed than before. Almost all of the episodes are tragically beautiful vignettes into the people that populate the galaxy that each explore different aspects of the human experience and critique real-world institutions. They also usually feed back into developing the main characters. That might sound formulaic and repetitive, but every story is unique and intellectually stimulating, while also being perfectly paced to never bore the viewer. The other main thing I love about this pilot is how rewatchable it is. With its symbolism and imagery, every time you watch it, you pick up on something new that you've never thought to look at before. Even just writing the script, I showed this to my older sibling, and they had a completely different interpretation of the beginning than I did. And that's exactly why I love this opening and why I love this show as a whole. Everyone can take whatever they want because none of it is explained to hell with the dialogue. You can take anything you want from the imagery itself. And that is honestly the best thing any piece of media can do. Something that is infinitely reconsumable and timeless. That goes for movies, shows, video games, books, and music. That not only applies to the pilot, however. Every episode is so dense with subtext and symbolism. I've watched Cowboy Bebop 4 times pretty much annually since I first saw it, and I will continue to rewatch it because it is timeless. It doesn't need a remake because there is nothing to remake. It's perfect just as it is. That doesn't mean you can't make something new from it without taking away what the original has. Lord Netflix, please, on behalf of my older sibling, I humbly request you to greenlight a loose sequel for Cowboy Bebop that will be animated. Here's the pitch. A what-if sequel anime where Spike survives his final fight with Vicious and reality itself that will be called Cowboy Bebop Reprise. It takes a year for Spike to recover, during which he begged doctors to remove his synthetic eye, which has caused him so much woe. Yes, Spike will have an edgy eye patch now. The Syndicate, now missing leadership, looks to Vicious Slayer. Meanwhile, Jet and Faye continue chasing bounties, with the two possessing a dynamic not dissimilar to Jet and Spike's in early Cowboy Bebop history. Faye's recklessness is of course more financially inclined. Her ambition is much to the chagrin of Jet's considered and cautious approach. They rarely speak of Spike, who to their knowledge died back on Mars. Spike is tasked with rebuilding the same syndicate that ruined his life, but he is promised by his underlings that he can make things different this time. They show him just how destructive the now fractured games have become, and the necessary evil of an organized syndicate does more good than harm. A particularly insightful syndicate member, named Wake, sees just how emotionally damaged this ex-cowboy is. He offers Spike his counsel. Through their discussions, we are introduced to flashbacks of Vicious, Spike, and Julia's missions. We see some justice for Julia's representation, and a relationship with Vicious that seems amicable with both her and Spike in spite of everything to come. Through these conversations, Spike finds some closure, as well as insight into the various problems the new syndicate faces. Jet and Faye are surprised by the return of Ed and Ein. Ed found their dad, but got bored and wanted to come back. They've matured a fair amount in the past year, though of course their strange mannerisms have not vanished. Jet comes to assume a more parental role to Ed, who has many questions about adulthood and their expectations in growing up. Faye acts more like the older sister, whilst they all take on increasingly dangerous bounties. The story comes to a head when an alarming bounty appears on the Bebop's radar, the head of the new syndicate, the photo being unmistakably Spike. The show is intended to be directly in conversation with the original. Spike's fatalistic outlook made the original show what it was, but what happens to a person who comes all the way around from that self-destructive life? How does one recover and come to see purpose where there once was nothing for them? The found family story of the original Bebop ended with a decisive divorce, with all the crews separated. Reprise is intended to reunite them, and perhaps bring the happy ending so few can get in this galaxy. Ed was always implied to be non-binary. How does an old-fashioned man like Jet find himself supporting and understanding them? How does Ed come to terms with adulthood approaching them? With the life Faye lost before, will she fight tooth and nail to keep the life she now has? Until critics and the general public stop dismissing the animated medium as children's content, we'll continue getting these useless, confusing messes parading as adaptations. I think we're slowly getting there, however. The recent Arcane show has been universally praised by critics and audiences alike. Despite it being a League of Legends show, it's actually pretty good. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse exists, and Netflix, despite their constant efforts to undermine the reputation of classic shows, are continually funding promising animated shows and movies. The point of this video is not only to shit on the adaptation, because I believe it has some promise, but they have to seize that potential and realize it rather than squander the reputation of the original show. I know there are people watching this that hate anime with a passion, and refuse to watch anything remotely related to Japan, and I completely understand. I fucking hate anime. It is the worst thing to ever happen on Earth, and it sucks. But in all seriousness, there are a lot of problematic and annoying tropes in anime that are very hard to avoid, given that they stem from Japanese culture. The overwhelming amount of transphobia, homophobia, sexism, and racism present in a lot of anime is very off-putting, but honestly, how different is that to Western media? Japan is just more overt about it. Although it has been getting better. Racist caricatures have almost all disappeared. Trans and queer representation has gotten much better over the past 10 years, and, well, okay, female representation hasn't improved that much over the years. For all the people who have refused to watch any anime, or those of you who really don't know where to go after Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood or Death Note, here's a list of shows, in no particular order, that don't have stupid bullshit and are genuinely incredible. There are obviously a lot more that I could recommend, but I implore you to look for them on your own, if you finish these and love them. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Congrats on getting this far, even if you just left the video on and didn't bother clicking something else. Please let me know what I could do better or what I left out, because I live off feedback and nothing else. I really enjoyed writing this as a break between writing about video games. If you couldn't tell by now, I love doing film analysis, and I don't want my channel to just be video games, although I will do a lot on that. So expect more film critique in the future. So after I finished writing the script and recording everything, Netflix announced that they cancelled Cowboy Bebop after the first season. which, first of all, nobody wanted it in the first place. When it came out, nobody liked it. So, yeah. Sorry, Netflix. You kind of made a bad decision there, but that is entirely your fault. It's funny to me that during the entirety of filming and writing and everything and editing, nobody on the team was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Should we be doing this? Everyone was okay with it. They released it. They were very happy about it. They were advertising it all the time. They made special trailers for it, and nobody wanted it in the first place, and everybody hated it. So, yeah, I don't know what they expected. From the conclusion that I made, I did say throughout the video and in the conclusion that I think this show had potential. I think definitely it had some good things in there that they could have went with, and they could have progressed and made it better. But yeah, no, I'm not too upset that they canceled it. Honestly, I'm pretty happy about it. But I will say, maybe if they actually make a show without the Cowboy Bebop name, but like taking inspiration, as I said before, I think that could actually be worth something. I think that could be good. But also, Netflix, just stop making live action adaptations of anime. You don't you don't have to do it, okay? There's no financial gain for you. Like, One Piece, don't make live action One Piece. Why are people excited for this? I immediately saw this and I was like, this is stupid. Everyone has to know this is stupid, right? Like, there's no way that a live action One Piece will ever work. To me, it didn't even work in the anime adaptation. I much prefer reading the manga. Firstly because the art's much better, and also like the original art is just, it perfectly represents what the story is about and what the characters are and what the world is. Like, you don't have to make adaptations of it. It's just like the anime adaptation, that's fine, but just keep it animated. Keep it in the same style. Don't try to make it live action, because it will fucking look stupid. Just, why are people excited for this? I don't care if it has good color. Alright, anyway, that's it for this addendum, I guess. Just had to put that in this before everyone starts pointing out that this video is outdated. So yeah, I just need to do that first. Just as a second addendum to my addendum, so this video is taking a bit longer than I was expecting. I was hoping it was just gonna be like a week of me just editing and writing and stuff, but it ended up not being that, so sorry about that. I wanted to get out my Fallout New Vegas video, but that's not gonna happen for a while. And I was also going to write, I'm in the middle of writing other stuff right now, but I guess I'm just releasing this first because this one is more relevant, and, well, it's probably not relevant now because the show came out like a month ago already, so this is already outdated. But yeah, I just wanted to get my thoughts out about it, and I think that it was important to do that. I don't know why. It's no one really cares what I think about things. But anyway, thank you for watching again. And also, I do have a Twitter thread on my Just a Snake Twitter account, going through all of the anime that I've watched and reviewing them. Most of them don't have spoilers, and I'm up to like 67 now or something. I don't know. I haven't done it in a while. But at some point I will continue that to go down my list. So if you want to look at that for anime recommendations, I would sincerely recommend that, because I'm actually pretty proud of some of those reviews, and some of them I am not as proud of. Oh, and also, sorry, I almost forgot. I do commissions on Timid Snake. I would like to do drawings and to get money for it. So that would be cool. Alright, see ya.